Hi, fam. Hopefully, you're doing well. I am here today with the CEO and co founder of Deeded. So, help me welcome Reuven. Now, this one, I must admit, kind of for the realtors, kind of. But what this is all about is how a realtor streamlines any client's process when they are buying a house. So, super important. I definitely saw him give this presentation before, and it incentivized me instantly to want to interview him. Why? Because the structure of how a client buys and sells real estate is critical. If you're not guiding the process properly, it really shows through and makes the process a lot more difficult for the client. And in saying that, it makes it harder on both clients. So if you're the seller and you guys have a very confusing, unorganized process, it makes it harder for any of the buyers because your side of the transaction is just confusing and up in the air. You really want a consistent, stable process, and it makes it so much smoother. So, with no further ado, kindly help me welcome him. Reuven, thank you so much for joining us here. Will you tell me, what does Deeded do?
Absolutely, Shawnice. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Deeded essentially is a platform that connects buyers, sellers, and borrowers with essentially friendly real estate lawyers, and we do that through a digital experience that really makes ultimately the closing experience a lot more smoother, predictable, and ultimately seamless, right? Getting that seamlessness that everybody wants on the path to homeownership.
Am I correct to say that you work with both buyers and sellers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, with that being said, I did do a little introduction. I was saying that this one might be a little bit more for the realtors, but nonetheless, you do want a seamless process and you want this to be more simplistic more than anything. The process of buying and selling can often have its stressors. So, in what way is your business simplifying the process for clients?
Absolutely. So ultimately for us, closing, for those of you that may have not gone through, buying or selling a house, closing is the equivalent of the last mile. It's the last step once you've got an agreement in place to buy a place or to sell a place. This is where there's a flurry of activity that needs to happen in order to do a couple things. One is to do a little bit of due diligence about the property that you just bought or sold, making sure that something that we call title, essentially that ownership to your property, gets transferred. And there's a lot of steps that happen really behind the scenes, obviously, with the due diligence, with assembling all the legal documents that are required, with working with your bank or lender or mortgage company to ensure that the funds all come into what is typically like a lawyer's trust account, and ultimately resulting, if you're buying a place, is really taking the contract to keys in your hand. So welcome home. Here are your keys. We're done, and that the property is now registered in your name or the buyer's names. And the exact opposite when you're selling, it's getting those proceeds, getting the money into your account, and making sure that you're ready to either buy your next property or do what you wish with the proceeds of your sale. Now, as I mentioned, lots of steps, lots of complexity that's involved. So today, from a home buyer, home seller perspective, typically that process, you'll go to a real estate lawyer. You might have one, you might be recommended one by your realtor or friends or family. and they'll essentially manage all the different pieces that happen. The first thing that we saw in the industry is that lack of transparency. And let me sort of explain a little bit more in terms of what I mean by that. Transparency to me is today's modern consumer who's on Amazon or who's on Uber or any of these other Instacart, any of these other services that we're all on today, is about knowing what's going on at any given time and knowing essentially what to expect next. So commonly for any buyer, seller, doesn't matter if it's your first time or if it's your 15th time, odds are there's still a lot of learning about the process and the transaction. There'll always be a little bit of a quirk or an exception or something that comes up in the 11th hour that needs to be handled in order for your transaction to close. Now, what we saw is today that process requires a bunch of phone calls and follow-ups and voicemails. And that, by the way, speaks to both the buyer and seller, but also their realtor. So as you're representing a client, Shawnice, you've got folks that are highly stressed. They don't quite know what's going on. So we've essentially brought transparency into the process. We do that with a digital dashboard that's very similar to if you've ever used an Uber or ever bought anything on Amazon, you'll know with Deeded exactly what's going on at any given time. You'll also know what's happening next. If you ever need to reach any of our partner lawyers or any of our support team, that's always going to be a click away. You can call, you can text. There's a really, really amazing group with deep expertise behind the scenes to help you out. So that's sort of part one, is really bringing that transparency that we saw as a big opportunity. The other part is to be able to do this virtually. So if you've gone through closing, you'll probably recall that this process somehow ends in a lawyer's office, signing stacks of documents on paper and walking away with a package of documents and kind of thinking about what have I just signed, right? Now with recent changes, and which were primarily accelerated by COVID, we're able to close your transaction virtually, which means just like you and I are on a Zoom call right now, you'll be able to use our proprietary platform to sign those documents from anywhere. And what I mean by that is you can sign them any time as well. If it's, if the evening's convenient because you're a busy professional, or maybe you've got kids that need to go to sleep at a certain time, you can sign your documents from home. You can sign them from the office. In certain cases, you can even be away on holiday. So life no longer stops when you've got a real estate deal to close. Because we used to have people that, back in the day, well, hey, you need to be in town on March 28th because that's when you're signing your documents. And you're like, well, there goes my business trip, right? Or there goes my holiday. So those are just two of the ways that we're ultimately simplifying that experience. There's a lot more to it, but really it's bringing that whole experience to the 21st century standard that we've all become used to.
Incredible. So I had the pleasure of firsthand seeing your presentation. And if I can articulate what I understood from the presentation, this is a platform that ties everyone together seamlessly and makes everything more efficient and effective. So the whole premise of it is kind of like an orchestra. So for myself, I don't know who knows this, but I come from restaurants. And my perspective of the restaurant is the server that's the person that's kind of orchestrating everything. They know when your food's coming out. They know they're going to order your drink. The front of the house or the people at the door are seating you, but everything is connected. And if done well and right, it's a well-oiled machine that you never really have to turn around and say, where's my food? Things might be taking so long. You have the answers at your fingertips prior. And that's what your business reminds me of.
Yeah, absolutely, Shawnice. And I love the connection to the food services business. And as we know, and I think, you and I have touched on it, if you take some of those experiences and really transpose them over to real estate, what does your realtor do? Your realtor is really that orchestrator, that conductor that ultimately quarterbacks all the various things that need to happen. And there are a lot of things that happen in the process of buying a home, from pre-qualifying for your mortgage to obviously seeing a property you're going to fall in love with, the negotiation piece, the offer piece, waiving different legal conditions, inspection, and things like that. I can go on and on and on. But ultimately, you want to do business with a realtor that will represent your best interest in orchestrating all those pieces of complexity. As a buyer and seller, I don't want to be dealing with all these different parties and not knowing what I don't know, and have the potential of making a mistake that's going to be costly. So ultimately, the way we look at it from a closing perspective, yes, it's one of the most collaborative processes, because it's when everything comes together and we got to wrap a bow around it, and it has to, come out the other side as a done deal, welcome home type of workflow, right?
Right.
So ultimately, yes, we've opened it up to allow, for example, if you're working with a mortgage broker or a lender, or all the various pieces that need to come together and effectively communicate in one place, share any information or files, of course, with measures of security and permissions, and in terms of who can see what and who can access information. But ultimately, to the consumer, to the home buyer seller, that everything is being orchestrated in the background. And not only do but you can actually track what's happening. And that's where the real magic happens, because today, again, going back to that Amazon or Uber example, I just ordered something just off an e-commerce website. I needed an electrical part, and I got no visibility. I put in the order, I got a confirmation email. I have no idea when this part is coming, if it's shipped, even if I don't even know if actually payment even went through, right? So here I am, getting anxiety and trying to understand what's going on and why am I not able to track it. And we know that in any other world, if I ordered from Amazon, it would have been very different. You literally get that notification that, hey, it's coming at 11 o'clock, and it usually does, right? So no different in the real estate transaction. Yes, we're orchestrating, but what's orchestration without visibility, right? And when you have that visibility, all of a sudden your anxiety really dies down, because you feel that you're in control and you know what's going on.
Yeah, there's a real sense of synergy. And I'm really happy that you brought up that example, because I feel your business. I came from a restaurant, so chaotic worlds where it's people want to know. And so I identify with your business on that stand front, because I'm very customer service based. But the fact that you said, I ordered something and I didn't get communication, that really hit home to me, because I've done the same. And I was like, did they get the payment? Did I do that? Should I call them to verify? It is actually very confusing when you don't have something following up to be like, your order has been received. Even if I'm waiting a month, I just want to know, did that go through? Did that happen? So that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that.
We're talking about, closing as being the last mile. The most important thing that we find is people will associate, or buyers or sellers will associate, that closing experience with their entire home buying experience. Like if you had a really bad experience, all you're ever going to remember is how bad that experience was, and you're going to forget all the joyous and all the good stuff that happened before that.
It's like going to a restaurant and having the most incredible experience, but then you're waiting for the bill and you're like,
right.
okay, can I pay and go, please? So yeah, I get that. Will you educate me? Where does deeded fit into the transaction? At what point should I be calling you guys up and being like, okay, have a client, let's tie you in. So essentially you can be the orchestrator.
Yeah, so it would be the same as you would today in terms of your client engaging a lawyer to close their transaction. So essentially, deeded or any if you choose to use a local or your favorite lawyer, they get engaged at a point where the transaction's been signed, that agreement's been signed, either it's a purchase or a sale. And most of the times when the conditions have been waived. So yes, conditions are making a comeback, and those conditions for inspection or financing have been waived, and we're ready to proceed to that next step, which is, again, that last mile of the deal.
Got it. So I'm going to take a little step back for a moment and just sum it up for anyone who's not a realtor listening. Essentially, in the process, what happens is you meet with your trusted realtor, you discuss your needs, they set you up with a criteria search, you go, super critical thing to correct. They set you up with your needs, but also you need a pre-approval.
Yes.
So you get your pre-approval, shop the market, you fall in love with your dream house, we put in an offer, perfect world, we get it, congrats. At which time, whether there's conditions on, like we've submitted an offer with conditions or not, at that point, around that point, is when the lawyer kicks in. Because they'll want to review the document. They'll want to review the conditions. Once conditions are starting to be waived, you're already going to want the lawyer to be on board and know of you and your purchase. So that's when Deeded kind of kicks in and starts orchestrating between myself, you, the mortgage broker or lender, not necessarily the home inspector, but the home inspector still orchestrates through the realtor, and we then waive the condition or whatever. But we all are on board to create a real estate team for you. And that's what I wanted to make sure to chronologically get your mind around. So yes, that would be the process and when Deeded kicks in.
Absolutely. And even from the point that we kick in, again, it's understanding what are some of the steps, and some of those steps will be more transaction specific. So for example, condominiums might have a little bit of a different process in that they have a little bit of a different structure. So there may be a document called a status certificate that maybe need to be reviewed even as a condition or prior to putting an offer on a condo. And quite simply, maybe just to simplify it for the audience, a status certificate is essentially think about it as a health status of a building or condo building that will review budgets, any litigation, anything that might be a little bit off, because as a buyer of a condo, I want to know that I'm not, my maintenance fees are not going to triple the next year because the building has been badly managed. So in that case, this document, which will be facilitated through the realtor and the lawyer, and this is maybe an example where Deeded might kick in a little bit earlier than having a firm offer, is to help you review that document. So essentially, we'll get one of our partner lawyers to review the document and take a look at it and provide essentially some input and advice based on what the document says, right? So really have you understand and simplify, so as a potential condo buyer, what you're committing to and what you could potentially look at in terms of the current situation of the building.
Absolutely. And even if it's not necessarily the health of a building that the status certificate will verify for you, there's things in there like bylaws of the building. And that can matter because, like, what if you're an investor and you want it to be an Airbnb? And they might specifically state that's not going to happen in this building. So it is very important to have a trusted lawyer on your side and educating you on the process as we go through it. So that's a great point.
Ultimately, we'd love to be, your partner in that closing experience. And so when you think about your property, whether you're buying or selling, deeded.ca is the place where you want to go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Friends, as always, please like, comment, and share. Thank you.